sent him there to spread the gospel, basically. And of course, what happened is that they repented. And that really upset Jonah, because suddenly they were going to be acceptable to God. Oh my goodness. Fancy that. Somebody else that was an awful person actually being saved. Wow. I remember somebody saying that about me. How could he save you? How could he bring you to God? What an awful person you were. You know, I can understand it with me because I'm all right. But you, I can't believe that God would save you. Well, this was a little bit of what was going on here with Jonah. And that's what he was saying, in effect. He was so incensed by it that he wanted to die. He just couldn't believe what God was doing. These were not the people of God. These were evil, pagan, unbelieving scum as far as he was concerned. They were just wrong. They shouldn't be saved. This is how Jonah felt, you see. And so what happened then is that it says here, and the Lord prepared a plant and made it come up over Jonah, that it might be shade for his head to deliver him from his misery. So Jonah was very grateful for the plant. But as morning dawned the next day, God prepared a worm. And it so damaged the plant that it withered. And it happened when the sun arose that God prepared a vehement east wind, and the sun beat on Jonah's head so that he grew faint. And then he wished death for himself and said, "It is better for me to die than to live." And then God said to Jonah, "Is it right for you to be angry about the plant?" And he said, "It is right for me to be angry, even to death." But the Lord said, "You have had pity on the plant for which you have not laboured, nor made it grow, which came up in a night and perished in a night. And should I not pity Nineveh, that great city in which are more than 120,000 people who cannot discern between their right hand and their left, and much livestock?" So God was obviously speaking very, very clearly to Jonah and saying, what right have you got to talk back to me about who I should save and who I shouldn't? Who are you in your righteousness to think that somebody else who doesn't come up to your standard, who may seem to you as being terrible, what right have you got to make that judgment? And you see, it's the same really in the gospel that the Lord is actually speaking about in these verses. What right have we got to judge other people and to decide who should get what in the kingdom? Where does it say that we shouldn't just appreciate what God has given us? Where does it say that we can't just work things out with our own relationship with God and be happy with that? The fact that we have been given that grace by God, the fact that we have been blessed by God, why should we then be worrying about someone else who may have other gifts? You may be in a situation where you start to get judgmental about the kind of people that you associate with. Because the big problem, the danger when we become Christians is that we suddenly forget where we've come from. We suddenly forget that, you know, how many times did we murder somebody in our minds before we met with Christ? How many times did we break God's law? That we are indeed sinners, saved by grace, and there but for the grace of God go I. And so any form of jealousy, any form of resentment because God has blessed someone over you in some way, is totally wrong. You know, when we think of all the things in this world and all the things we have, everything we have belongs to God. This is the same God who created the universe. And so everything we have belongs to him. Our money, even our time on this earth, even our very breath. He breathed life into us. We belong to him. And so we have no right to think that one person or another person should not be given blessings by God, that shouldn't be saved, that shouldn't be able to serve God and to be given certain gifts to use in his kingdom and for the extension of the work of Christ. And so it's all about jealousy. How do we feel about our brothers and sisters? How do we feel about other people? You know, how often have we heard horrendous stories about people maybe coming off the street and coming into a church, and people kind of turning up their nose, you know, looking down on these other people, you know, like they're kind of some type of scum or rubbish, because maybe they wear leather jackets, or because they dress in a gothic way, or they may not look like, you know, what are those wives, the Stepford wives, that they don't look like Mr. and Mrs. Average or Mr. and Mrs. Boring, you know, that they actually look different, and maybe they've come from a really difficult place. Maybe they're homeless, maybe they've got problems, maybe they've got mental health issues, maybe they just have a really bad upbringing and they don't know how to behave around people. But the fact of the matter is they're made in God's image. We have to be people who love other people. We have to be people who are winsome for Christ. We have to be people who want to bring people to God, not to shut people out, and not to be resentful or jealous when somebody comes in and suddenly something wonderful happens to that person and they get transformed by the love of God. That God's love just seems to just totally change them. And a person that maybe we didn't get on with very well before, a person that maybe did some awful things before. But we have to be open to what God is saying to us. We have to be open to the fact that we have to be charitable, that we are not to be jealous of one another. And even as ministers, even in the church, there is this jealousy, there's this territorial thing that takes place, and something that is totally wrong in Christendom. And we've got to get away from that rubbish, because it's not honouring to God. It's not honouring to God at all. And so this is one of the things that we need to be aware of. It's jealousy, because it's like a bitter root that grows up inside us. Jealousy causes us to be passive-aggressive, causes us to be, well, we can do all sorts of things. Look at the people who've actually murdered people just out of jealousy. Think of people in relationships, how jealousy can destroy a partnership, a relationship. If a husband or wife is so insanely jealous that their partner can't even move, this is a problem, and it's something we need to deal with as Christians. We need to be gracious, we need to be loving, we need to be kind. And so things like jealousy, they create major problems. I mean, there are things even to the point where I've seen it before in churches where somebody gets invited by the pastor to dinner. You know, the pastor and his wife invites a couple in the church for a meal. And then other people are getting all jealous because they haven't been invited this year. And it causes problems. Somebody has a job in the church. Someone's doing something, they've been doing it regularly, but then somebody comes along who perhaps could do that job better. You know, somebody's been maybe doing a Sunday school thing or something, and somebody comes in who's really gifted as a teacher. And instead of being jealous of the new person coming in, we should be making room for them. You know, Joseph has come into our church, and he has a gift of music. Now, I like to sing, as you all know.
Oh no.
I try to sing, as you all know. And